The invitation called it a legacy dinner, but it felt more like an execution. I sat there, 33 years old, watching my father hand the entire estate to my brother, Trent. While offering me nothing but a rusted watch and a patronizing smile, he called it the only responsible choice. I thought I was just losing my inheritance, but I had no idea a missing $5.1 million was about to burn our family to the ground. The envelope was heavy, made of the kind of cream-colored cardstock that cost more than my first car. Embossed in gold leaf on the front were the words, "The Butler Legacy Dinner." It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons, a formal demand for my presence at a performance where I had not yet been given the script. I drove into Briar Glen just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the rolling hills that insulated our town from the rest of the world. The gates to my father's estate were open, flanked by stone lions that had terrified me when I was 6 and annoyed me now that I was 33. The driveway wound through manicured lawns that looked like green velvet, untouched by weeds or reality. My stomach turned. I told myself it was just the rich food I was anticipating. But deep down, I knew it was the specific anxiety that only family can manufacture. I had spent the last 7 years serving as the invisible spine of the Butler Hawthorne Group. When the logistics chain in the Midwest collapsed 2 years ago, I was the one on the phone at 3 a.m, rerouting shipments while my father slept and my brother, Trent, was on a ski trip in Aspen, when the union negotiations hit a wall. I was the one who drafted the compromise language that saved the strike from happening. I was not the face of the company. My father, Richard Butler, held that role with an iron grip, but I was its hands. Tonight was supposed to be the acknowledgement of that labor, the rumor mill, fueled by hints my father had dropped during Sunday calls. Suggested he was finally ready to name a successor. He was 72. His heart had given him a scare last winter. It was time. I parked my modest sedan between a Bentley and a vintage Jaguar. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but composed. I had worn navy blue, a serious color. I looked like a CEO. I looked like I belonged at the head of the table. I walked up the stone steps, taking a breath that rattled slightly in my lungs, inside. The house smelled of beeswax and expensive lilies. The foyer was already crowded with the sort of people who make up the ecosystem of a wealthy town. Board members, local charity heads, a state senator, and the high-ranking executives of our company. My mother, Evelyn, floated toward me in a gown of shimmering silver. She looked beautiful and brittle, like a glass ornament that would shatter if you held it too tight. "Madeline," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You made it. You look serious." I smiled. "It is a serious night." "Mother?" She patted my arm, her eyes darting toward the library where my father usually held court before dinner. "Just smile. Darling, let's keep everything pleasant. Your father is in a mood tonight." A mood. That was the family code for he is terrified of losing power. I made my way through the crowd, nodding to people I had known since childhood. I spotted Marcy Vellum near the bar. Marcy was the head of operations, a woman who wore blazers that were 2 sizes too big and possessed a mind sharp enough to cut diamonds. She was drinking sparkling water and looking at the floor. "Marcy," I said, stepping up beside her. She jumped, her eyes snapping to mine. "Madeline, I didn't see you come in. You look like you're waiting for a firing squad." I joked. She didn't laugh. She looked around the room, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It is a big night. That is all." I frowned. Marcy and I had spent hundreds of hours together in the trenches of corporate warfare. We didn't have secrets, or at least, I thought we didn't. Before I could press her, a bell chimed. The double doors to the dining hall opened. We filed in. The table was set for 30. Crystal goblets caught the light of the chandelier. I found my place card. I was seated to my father's left. Trent was on his right. Trent was already there, holding court with a glass of scotch in his hand. My brother was 2 years older than me and possessed the kind of effortless charm that allowed him to fail upward his entire life. He had the Butler jawline and the Hawthorne smile. He looked like a leader, even if he couldn't read a balance sheet to save his life. "Hey, Maddie," he said, flashing a grin. "Big night. You ready?" "Ready for what?" I asked. Sitting down. He winked. "Progress." My father entered last. The room went silent. Richard Butler commanded attention not through volume, but through a terrifying stillness. He walked to the head of the table, placed his hands on the back of his chair, and looked at us. He looked frail. I realized his skin was papery, and his suit hung a little loose on his frame. "Please, sit," he said. Dinner was an agonizing affair of 5 courses. I barely tasted the soup. I pushed the scallop around my plate. The conversation was polite, meaningless chatter about the charity gala and the new wing at the hospital. Every time I looked at my father, he was staring straight ahead, his jaw set. Finally, as the dessert plates were cleared, he stood up. He tapped a spoon against his glass. The sharp ding cut through the murmur of the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began. His voice was strong, rehearsed. "This house has seen many generations of Butlers. It has seen us rise from a small manufacturing plant to a conglomerate that employs thousands." He paused, letting the weight of the legacy settle over us. "I have spent my life building this," he said, "but a builder must know when to put down his tools." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This was it. I have thought long and hard about the future of the Butler-Hawthorne Group. He continued, "I have weighed the strengths of my children. I have looked at what this company needs to survive the next 50 years. He turned his head slowly. He looked at me. For a fleeting second, I saw something in his eyes. Pity? Regret? Then he looked away, turning his gaze to Trent. "The world is changing," he said. "It requires a leader who understands the bold strokes of vision, who can command a room and carry the family name with vigor. That is why, effective immediately, I am naming Trent Butler as the sole heir to the estate and the new controlling chairman of the Butler-Hawthorne Group." The applause was immediate, polite, and enthusiastic. I sat frozen. The heir had left the room. Sole heir, controlling chairman. Trent stood up, beaming, shaking hands, waving to the board members who were nodding as if this was the most natural thing in the world. My father raised a hand to quiet the room. He wasn't done. And to Madeline, he said. The room turned to me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "Madeline has been the steady hand," he said, "the dependable one, the one who keeps the lights on. Dependable." The word felt like a slap. It was the word you used for a golden retriever or a used sedan. "I want to thank her for her years of service," my father said, "and as a token of my gratitude, and a symbol of the time she has given us, I have something for her." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He slid it across the mahogany table toward me. I stared at it. "Go on," Trent said, his voice loud and jovial. "Open it, Maddie." I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly. I flipped the lid. Inside was a watch. It was a vintage Patek Philippe, leather strap worn soft. It had belonged to my grandfather. It was a beautiful object. It was also worth perhaps $10,000. The company was worth hundreds of millions. "I am leaving you this," my father said, his voice dropping to a register that sounded almost kind, which made it worse. "So you will always remember that your time is your own now. You are free to pursue your own happiness." Madeline, without the burden of the crown, the burden. He was framing my disinheritance as a gift. He was rewriting my devastation as liberation. I looked up at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and list every contract I had saved, every fire I had put out while Trent was sleeping off a hangover. But I was a butler. We did not scream at the dinner table. "Thank you, Father," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from someone else, someone miles away. "It is a lovely gesture." The dinner dissolved into brandy and cigars shortly after. I felt physically ill. I navigated the room like a ghost, dodging congratulations that felt like condolences. I found myself in a quiet corridor near the kitchen. leaning against the cool plaster of the wall, trying to regulate my breathing. Madeline. I looked up. It was my mother. She closed the distance between us quickly, the silk of her dress rustling. She reached out and took my hands. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "I know you are hurt," she said. "Hurt?" I whispered. "He just gave everything to Trent. Everything. Mom, I have run this company for 5 years in all but name. Trent doesn't even know the login to the vendor portal." "Lower your voice," she hissed, glancing down the hall. "This is insane." I said, "It is reckless. It is done," she said firmly. "Listen to me. Madeline, your father is not well. The stress of the decision has been eating him alive. He believes this is the right way. He believes Trent has the image we need for the next phase." "Image," I spat. "Since when does Image pay the payroll?" "Please," she said, her eyes pleading. "Do not make this ugly. The family cannot take a war right now. We are delicate. If you fight him on this, you will kill him. Do you understand me? You will kill him." It was emotional blackmail, distilled and pure. I pulled my hands away. "I won't cause a scene tonight." "Mother, thank you," she breathed. "You are a good girl. You have always been the good one." She turned and walked back toward the party, leaving me alone with the silence. I needed air. I headed toward the side exit that led to the terrace. But a hand shot out from the shadows of an alcove and grabbed my wrist. I gasped, spinning around. It was Marcy Vellum. Her face was pale, her lipstick chewed off. "Marcy," I said, "you scared me. I have to tell you something," she said. She was speaking fast, her words tripping over each other. "I shouldn't. If they know I talked to you, I'm dead. Professionally dead." "What is it?" I asked. "It's the money." "Madeline," she said, "the cash flow. It's been wrong for months." "What do you mean, wrong?" "I mean the revenue from the lattice division doesn't match the deposits," she said, "and the accounts payable are being cleared by transfers I can't track. Someone is smoothing the books. They are injecting cash to cover holes. But I don't know where it is coming from." I stared at her. My father ran a tight ship. He was many things, but he wasn't a sloppy accountant. "Maybe it is just a bridge loan?" I suggested. "No," Marcy said, shaking her head violently. "No loan documents, just cash. And now it has stopped. The last transfer didn't come through on the 1st of the month. We are floating on vapor. Madeline, if a major vendor asks for payment next week, the check is going to bounce." My blood ran cold. "Does Trent know?" Marcy let out a bitter laugh. "Trent? Trent thinks the money grows on the trees in the orchard. I tried to tell your father, but Graham Sutter blocked me. Graham Sutter was the family attorney, a man who wore 3-piece suits and smiled like a shark. Marcy, listen to me," I said, gripping her shoulder. "Do not sign anything. Do not authorize any strange transfers. I'm scared." "Maddie," she whispered, "I have a mortgage. I have kids. Keep your head down." I said, "I will figure this out." I watched her scurry away, vanishing into the kitchen staff entrance. My head was spinning. Disinheritance was one thing, bankruptcy was another. I needed to find my father. I needed to look him in the eye and ask him if he had given the company to Trent because he thought Trent was capable, or because he needed a scapegoat for a sinking ship. I moved toward the library. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. I heard voices, angry, hushed voices. I stopped. I knew the cadence of the argument. It was Trent. Told me it was handled. "Graham!" Trent's voice was pitched high, stressed. "It is being handled." Graham Sutter's smooth baritone replied, "You need to lower your voice. I don't want to hear about handling." Trent snapped. "I want to know why the account is flagged. That agreement was never supposed to surface. You said it was buried deep. It is buried." Sutter said, "But when you move assets of this size, debris floats to the top. You just need to hold the line. Trent, stick to the script your father gave you." I walked toward the door, intending to push it open, to confront them right there. What agreement? But the floorboard beneath my heel creaked. A sharp, dry crack in the silence of the hallway. The voices stopped instantly. I froze. "Who is there?" Trent called out. I stepped back, moving quickly into the shadows of the adjacent coat room, my heart hammering in my throat. I heard footsteps approach the door. Pause, and then retreat. The door clicked shut. The lock turned. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That agreement was never supposed to surface. My phone buzzed in my clutch. The vibration felt like a shock against my hip. I pulled it out. It was a text message. No caller ID. Just a string of digits. I stared at the screen. "If you want the truth about the estate, stop trusting the family lawyer. Check the old vendor files. Start with Lark Pine." Lark Pine. The name meant nothing to me. It sounded like a boutique candle shop, not a smoking gun. I looked at the closed library door. I looked at the party spilling out onto the lawn through the French doors down the hall. I didn't belong in either place. I walked up the grand staircase to the second floor, my legs feeling heavy. I went to my old bedroom. It had been preserved exactly as I had left it when I moved to the city. The floral wallpaper, the white vanity, the shelves of books. I needed something familiar. I needed a touchstone. I walked to the closet and knelt down. In the back corner, behind a stack of old yearbooks, was a loose floorboard. Beneath it, I had always kept a small, locked wooden box. It had been my grandfather's humidor, converted into a safe for my childhood treasures, diaries, photos, a silver dollar he gave me. I pulled up the board. The box was there. I reached for it. It felt wrong immediately. The wood was too smooth, too light. I pulled it out into the light of the room. It looked like the box. It was the same size, the same dark stain. But the grain was a printed veneer, not real mahogany. The brass latch was shiny and cheap, not the tarnished bronze of the original. I tried to open it. It wasn't even locked. Inside, it was empty. My breath hitched. Someone had found my hiding spot. Someone had taken the real box, the box that contained nothing of monetary value, but everything of sentimental value, and replaced it with a prop. It was a message. "We know where you hide things. We can reach you anywhere." I sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom, the cheap box in my lap, and felt a cold fury ignite in my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was a violation. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. I heard the guests leave. I heard the caterers pack up. I heard the silence that follows a disaster. The next morning, the sun rose with an offensive cheerfulness. The sky was a perfect cloudless blue. I went down to breakfast. The dining room was bright and airy. Trent was already there, eating Eggs Benedict and reading the Wall Street Journal. He looked annoyingly fresh. "Morning, Maddie," he said, not looking up. "Sleep well?" "Where is Dad?" I asked, pouring myself black coffee. "Golf," Trent said. "He went out early, said he needed to clear his head. He's avoiding me." I said. Trent put the paper down. He sighed. "He's not avoiding you. He hates confrontation. You know that. There shouldn't be a confrontation." "Trent, I just want to understand why." "Look," Trent said, leaning forward. He put on his best winning smile. "I know this stings. I do. But Dad is right. You're great at the details. Maddie, you're a grinder. But the company needs a face. It needs charisma. And that's you?" I asked. Trent shrugged. "It's my gift. But listen, I've been thinking. I don't want you out in the cold. I want you on the team. I waited. I want to bring you on as a special consultant." He said, "You can keep your office. You can handle the logistics, the vendor relations, all that stuff you love. You'd report to me, obviously, but I'd give you a lot of autonomy. A consultant." He was offering me my old job back, but stripped of all authority, reporting to the brother I used to tutor in math. He wanted to keep me close so I could do the work while he took the credit. "It's a generous offer," Trent said. "Dad thinks it's a great idea." I stared at him. I saw the fear behind his eyes. He needed me. He didn't know how to run the company, and he knew it, but he also needed to control me. I stood up. "I'll think about it." I said, I walked out of the house. I packed my bag. I threw the cheap wooden box into the trash can in the garage. I got into my car and drove down the long, winding driveway. I passed the stone lions. I reached the main road that led back to the highway, back to the city, back to my apartment where I could drink wine and cry and start looking for a job at a competitor. I turned on my blinker to go left, toward the highway. Then I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 9 in the morning. I thought about the text message, Lark Pine. I thought about Marcy's shaking hands. The money has stopped. I thought about the fake box. I turned off the blinker. I wasn't going home. I turned the wheel to the right, heading toward the center of Briar Glen. There was a bed and breakfast on Main Street. I would book a room for 1 week. 1 week. Just enough time to find out who Lark Pine was. Just enough time to figure out why my father was terrified. Just enough time to make them regret thinking I was only good for being dependable. I pressed the gas pedal. The engine roared. I wasn't the air anymore. I was the opposition. The diner was called The Kettle, a roadside fixture with vinyl booths that had been cracked and taped over since the 90s. It was the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the pie was thawed, and nobody from the country club set would ever be caught dead. That made it the perfect place to meet Marcy Vellum. I arrived 10 minutes early, sliding into a corner booth that offered a view of the door. I ordered a black coffee and watched the steam rise, my mind replaying the events of the legacy dinner on a loop. The humiliation, the watch, the look in my father's eyes. When Marcy walked in, she looked like she hadn't slept. She wore a heavy raincoat despite the mild weather, and her usually immaculate bun was fraying at the edges. She scanned the room nervously before spotting me. She didn't wave. She just hurried over and slid into the seat opposite mine. "You shouldn't have come back to town," Marcy said. Her voice was low, barely audible over the clatter of silverware from the kitchen. "I'm not leaving, Marcy. Not until I understand what is happening." She signaled the waitress and ordered a water with lemon. She waited until the girl left before she leaned in, her hands clasping together on the tabletop. "They are watching the internal emails." She whispered, "Graham Sutter has the IT department flagging any correspondence that mentions the accounts payable discrepancies. If they knew I was here, I would be fired before I finished this sentence." I reached across the table and covered her hands with mine. Her skin was ice cold. "Tell me about the money," I said. "You said it stopped." Marcy took a deep breath. She looked around the diner one more time, checking the faces of the truck drivers and the locals eating pancakes. "About 4 years ago, right after the expansion into the tri-state area started to wobble, we took a hit, a big one. We were overextended, and the banks were getting nervous about our liquidity ratios. Your father was panic-stricken. I remember him closing his office door for 3 days. I nodded. I remembered that time. He had told me he was working on a strategic realignment. I had believed him. Then, suddenly, the problem vanished. Marcy said, "A fresh injection of capital appeared in the operating account. It was categorized as silent partner equity." "How much?" I asked. $5.1 million. Over the course of 30 months. Marcy said, "It came in irregular chunks. 300,000 here, 500,000 there. Always just enough to smooth out the payroll or cover a vendor payment that was about to go past due. $5 million doesn't just appear." "Marcy, who is the partner?" "That is the problem," she said, her eyes widening. "I don't know. Nobody knows. The transfers came through a private holding vehicle. The paperwork in the finance office is blank where the signature should be. It just says, 'Authorized by R. Butler, my father.'" "Yes," she said, "but here's the terrifying part. Madeline, the money stopped 3 weeks ago. We were expecting a transfer to cover the quarterly bond payments. It never came. And the bank? They called yesterday." She said, "They noticed the liquidity drop. They are asking for an updated schedule of investors. If they find out that $5 million of our operating capital came from a ghost who has suddenly ghosted us, they will call the loans. The company will be insolvent within a month." I sat back against the vinyl seat, the gravity of it settling on my chest. My father hadn't just disinherited me to give Trent the glory. He had handed Trent a grenade with the pin pulled out. Does Trent know? I asked. Marcy hesitated. I don't think he knows the mechanics of it. He knows there is a partner. He walks around saying we have backing and the resources are secured, but he doesn't look at the ledgers. He just assumes the magic money faucet will keep running. I drank my coffee. It tasted like burnt toast and acid. I need to see the vendor files. I said, You can't. Marcy hissed. Trent sent a memo this morning. All non-executive access to the archives is revoked. All requests go through legal, meaning Graham Sutter. I stood up, dropping a $20 bill on the table. Thank you. Marcy, go back to work. Don't talk to me again unless it is an emergency. I don't want you to lose your job. What are you going to do? She asked, looking up at me with fearful eyes. I am going to visit the office. I said, I still own shares, however few, and I am still a butler. Let them try to stop me. Driving to the Butler Hawthorne headquarters felt like driving to a funeral for a relative I hadn't realized I loved until they were gone. The building was a sleek structure of glass and steel on the edge of town, a monument to my father's ego. I had spent more hours in that building than I had in my own apartment. I knew the security guards by name. I knew which elevator was the fastest. I parked in the visitor lot, since my reserved spot had likely been painted over already. I walked to the front doors, squaring my shoulders. The lobby was cool and smelled of sanitized air. The receptionist was a young woman named Chloe. I had hired her 2 years ago. Good morning, Chloe, I said, breezing past the desk toward the elevators. Ms. Butler, Chloe squeaked. She scrambled up from her chair. Ms. Butler, please wait. I stopped and turned. She looked terrified. I am sorry, she stammered. I have instructions. Mr. Trent? The chairman. He issued a new protocol this morning. All visitors must be announced and cleared by the legal department. I stared at her. Visitors? Chloe, I built the employee handbook you are quoting from. I know, she said, her face flushing red. I am so sorry. But Mr. Sutter said no exceptions. Especially not me? I finished for her. She nodded miserably. Call him. I said, tell him I'm going to records. If he wants to physically remove me, he can come down here and do it himself in front of the lobby cameras. Chloe hesitated, her hand hovering over the phone. I turned and walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. I didn't look back. I knew Graham Sutter. He was a bully, but he hated a scene. He wouldn't drag me out by my hair. Not yet. The elevator dinged at the 4th floor. The records department was a quiet, windowless kingdom of filing cabinets and servers. It was staffed by a man named Arthur, a meticulous actuary who had been with the company since before I was born. But Arthur wasn't at his desk. Instead, a junior clerk named David was sitting there, scrolling through his phone. He jumped when I walked in. Ms. Butler, he said, scrambling to hide the phone. I didn't know you were in the building. I need to see the vendor contracts for the last 3 years. David, specifically, any consulting firms categorized under general advisory. David looked at his screen, then back at me. I don't think I have authorization for that. Ms. Butler, the system is locked down. David, I said, stepping closer. I remember when you started here. I remember fixing the error you made on the expansive soil report that could have cost you your job. I didn't tell my father then. I am asking you to print a list now. He swallowed hard. He looked at the door. He looked at me. Just a list? He whispered. Just a list, and the invoices attached to them. He typed quickly, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The printer in the corner whirred to life. He snatched the papers from the tray before the machine had even finished cooling down and handed them to me. Please go, he said. I looked at the stack. The top name caught my eye immediately. Lark Pine Advisory. It appeared again and again, month after month. I scanned the descriptions of service, strategic consulting, market analysis, logistical support. The amounts were staggering. $15,000, $22,000, $18,000. I knew the market rates for consulting. These numbers were inflated by at least 400%. And the descriptions were nonsense. Logistical support for a company that owned its own trucking fleet? It was a joke. Thank you, David, I said. I walked out, tucking the papers into my bag. I passed the finance offices on my way back to the elevator. I glanced into the office of the controller, a man named Jim Halloway. His office was dark. The blinds were drawn. I stopped a passing intern. Where is Mr. Halloway? He resigned, the intern said, balancing a tray of coffees. Sent an email at 6 this morning. Security escorted him out an hour ago. My stomach tightened. Jim Halloway was the one who signed off on the vendor checks. He had cleared his desk and vanished the moment the sun came up. He was running. I got back to my car and looked at the invoice for Lark Pine. There was an address listed at the bottom. 1400 Industrial Way. Suite 204, Briar Glen. I knew Industrial Way. It was a strip of warehouses and auto body shops on the south side of town. It wasn't where high-end consultants set up shop. I drove there. The reality was even more pathetic than I had imagined. Number 1400 was a strip mall containing a dry cleaner, a vape shop, and a place called the Ship Go. I walked into the Ship Go. It smelled of cardboard and packing tape. A teenager with headphones around his neck was leaning on the counter. Help you? He asked. I am looking for Suite 204, I said. He pointed to a wall of brass mailboxes lining the side of the shop. Box 204, he said. Top row. I stared at the small metal door. It wasn't an office. It wasn't a firm. It was a mail drop. Do you know who picks up the mail for that box? I asked. The kid shrugged. Some guy? Courier? I think. Comes in once a week. Never says much. I looked at the box again. Lark Pine. It sounded so elegant, so established, but it was just a 2-inch by 3-inch hole in a wall next to a vape shop. This was where the money was going, or rather, this was where the money was being washed. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Dad. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Hello, Father. Madeline. His voice came through the speaker. It sounded tired, softer than I was used to. I heard you were at the office today. I said, I was visiting old friends. I wish you wouldn't. He said, it disrupts the team. Trent is trying to establish his authority. When you show up, it confuses people. I stood in the shipping store, watching the teenager pack a box of shoes. I found Lark Pine. Dad. I said, silence. Absolute, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then, a sigh. Come to the house, Madeline, now, alone. I drove back to the estate. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the lawn. The house looked like a fortress. My father was in the solarium, sitting in a wicker chair, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. The vitality he had summoned for the dinner had evaporated. Sit down, he said. I sat. You are digging. Madeline, he said. I told you to take the watch and be happy. Why can't you just be happy? Because you are lying to me. I said, you didn't give the company to Trent because he is the better choice. You gave it to him because of this, because of the silent partner, because of Lark Pine. He looked out the window at the garden. You don't understand, he said softly. Then tell me. I did what I had to do to protect this family, he said. Business is not always clean. Madeline, sometimes you have to make agreements to survive. Sometimes you have to accept help from people you would rather not know. Who is the partner? I asked. It doesn't matter, he said. It matters if they own us, I snapped. Marcy told me the money stopped. The bank is asking questions. The controller resigned this morning. The walls are caving in. Dad, and you put Trent in the center of the room because you knew he was too stupid to notice the roof was falling. He flinched. Don't speak about your brother that way. Why? Because it's true? You sacrificed him. You knew I would ask questions. You knew I would find the holes in the ledger. So you pushed me out to save me, didn't you? Or did you push me out because I wouldn't have played along with the blackmail? He turned to me, his eyes wet. There was fear there. Genuine, primal fear. I am trying to avoid a scandal that would destroy your mother, he whispered. I am trying to keep this family from becoming a pariah. If you keep pulling at these threads, the whole tapestry unravels. Please, Madeline, walk away. He wasn't commanding me. He was begging me. I looked at him, the man I had idolized my whole life, and saw a coward. He had built a legacy on a foundation of quicksand, and now he was asking me to pretend the ground wasn't moving. I stood up. I can't do that. Dad, I am not Trent. I don't close my eyes when things get ugly. I left him sitting there, small and defeated in the sunlight. I drove back to the bed and breakfast. I felt drained. I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the floral wallpaper. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo, grainy, taken in low light. It showed a concrete parking structure. Two men were standing near a black SUV. One of them was Trent. He looked agitated, his hands thrown up in the air. The other man was turned away from the camera, his face obscured by a hat and the shadows. But the posture was aggressive. He was leaning into Trent's space. Below the photo was a caption. "He's been paying to keep you out." I stared at the image. Trent knew. My brother, who played the role of the oblivious golden boy, was meeting with the people who were draining our company. He was part of the deal. I didn't think, I just acted. I knew where Trent lived. He had a modern condo downtown, a bachelor pad he had bought with his bonus last year, a bonus I had approved. I drove there. I didn't buzz up. I waited in the lobby until a neighbor came out, and I caught the door. I took the elevator to the penthouse floor. I pounded on his door. Trent opened it, wearing a cashmere sweater and holding a glass of wine. He looked surprised, then annoyed. "Maddie? What the hell are you doing here? You can't just—" I shoved past him into the living room. "Who are you meeting in parking garages?" "Trent?" I asked, spinning around to face him. He froze. The color drained from his face. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, closing the door. "I have a photo." "Trent!" I shouted. I held up my phone. I showed him the grainy image. He stared at it. His hand shook, spilling a drop of wine on the hardwood floor. "Who sent you that?" he whispered. "It doesn't matter. Who is he? Is that the silent partner? Is that who we are paying through Lark Pine?" Trent set the glass down. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked like he was about to vomit. "You need to stop. Maddie, seriously. You are playing with things you don't understand. I understand that you are laundering money," I yelled. "I understand that Dad cut me out because he knew I wouldn't agree to be a puppet for whoever this is." Trent's face twisted. He stepped toward me, his expression shifting from fear to a defensive, ugly anger. "You think you're so smart?" he sneered. "You think you're the only one who can run things, but you don't know what it takes to keep the lights on. Dad did what he had to do, and I am doing what I have to do." "By paying off a blackmailer?" I asked. "Because that is what this looks like." "It is not blackmail," he shouted. It is leverage. It is a necessary cost." He took a breath, lowering his voice. "Listen to me, Maddie. If you keep digging, you are going to hurt innocent people. Not just Dad, not just me, employees, people in this town. If this gets out, everything collapses. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the one who destroys the Butler name just because you didn't get the big chair?" It was a good speech. It was the speech of a martyr. But I saw the tremble in his lip. He was parroting something he had been told. Hurt innocent people. That was the threat they were using to keep him in line. I looked at him with pity. "You are already destroying the name." "Trent," I said quietly, "you just haven't realized it yet because you are too busy posing for the pictures." I turned to leave. "Maddie," he called out. His voice cracked. "Don't do this." I walked out. I sat in my car outside his building. My hands were shaking. I was alone. My father was compromised. My brother was complicit. The family lawyer was an enforcer. I couldn't do this by myself. I was an operations manager, not a detective. I needed someone who could look at the numbers and see the crime. I needed someone who didn't care about the Butler reputation. I pulled out my phone. I searched for a name I had heard mentioned in legal circles. A woman known for being brilliant and terrifyingly thorough. Elena Parkhurst. Forensic accounting and fraud examination. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Parkhurst. A woman's voice answered. Sharp. No nonsense. Ms. Parkhurst, I said. My name is Madeline Butler. I have a box of invoices that don't add up. A brother who is meeting people in parking garages, and a family company that is missing $5 million. I need to hire you. There was a pause on the line. I heard the click of a lighter. I charge $400 an hour, she said. And I don't sign ND. As that cover criminal activity, I don't want you to cover it. I said, I want you to find it. Meet me tomorrow at 8, she said. Bring the invoices. I hung up. I looked up at Trent's penthouse window. The light was on. The war had started. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to save the family. I was preparing to prosecute them. Elena Parkhurst's office was not what I expected. I had anticipated mahogany desks and leather chairs, the standard uniform of high-priced consultants in Briar Glen. Instead, she worked out of a converted loft space in the Arts District, a room that smelled of ozone and hot coffee. Her desk was a slab of reclaimed industrial steel, covered in dual monitors and stacks of paper that were aligned with military precision. Elena herself was sharp angles and intense focus. She didn't offer me tea. She didn't ask about my father's health. She simply pointed to the chair opposite her and started talking. I have gone through the documents you brought, she said. Her voice was dry, like rustling paper, and I cross-referenced them with the public filings available for the Butler Hawthorne Group. What did you find? I asked. She turned a monitor toward me. It displayed a timeline, color-coded in red and green. Look at the red blocks, she said. These represent the dates where your company's cash flow dropped below the operational threshold. These are payroll gaps, times when the accounts payable exceeded liquid assets by more than 20%. Effectively, these are the moments your company was insolvent. I looked at the screen. There were 12 red blocks over the last 3 years. 12 times the company had technically been broke. Now look at the green blocks, Elena said. The green blocks appeared immediately after the red ones. In every single instance, the green blocks are invoices paid to Lark Pine Advisory, she said. Or rather, they are booked as payments from Lark Pine that were voided and returned, or consulting credits applied to the ledger. It is messy accounting, Madeline, deliberately so, but the timing is undeniable. Every time the company was about to miss payroll, this entity injected exactly enough cash to cover the hole. I stared at the pattern. It wasn't an investment strategy, it was a defibrillator. This isn't a silent partner, Elena said, leaning back in her chair. Investors put money in because they want growth. They want to see a new factory or a marketing campaign. This money didn't go to growth. It went to survival. It was life support. So they were saving us? I asked. Elena shook her head. Her eyes were dark and cynical. Investors save companies to make a profit, she said. This feels different. This feels like leverage. Someone was keeping the company alive, but only just barely. They were keeping you desperate. And the fact that it was routed through a fake vendor suggests they didn't want a seat on the board. They wanted control without fingerprints. The phrase stuck in my throat. Control without fingerprints. I thought about Trent. I thought about the fear in his eyes when I showed him the photo. He wasn't running the company. He was being held hostage by it. I need to see the board minutes. I said, standing up, I need to see who authorized these specific transactions. Good luck, Elena said. If your corporate counsel is worth his hourly rate, those minutes are already buried. Graham Sutter's office was on the top floor of a glass tower that looked down on the rest of Briar Glen like a watchtower. I didn't make an appointment. I knew that if I called, his secretary would tell me he was in depositions until the next millennium. I walked past the receptionist, ignoring her protests, and pushed open the heavy glass doors to his private suite. Graham was standing by the window, looking out at the skyline. He turned slowly, his expression one of bored irritation rather than surprise. Madeline, he said, to what do I owe the pleasure of this intrusion? I want the board minutes. Graham, specifically the minutes from the executive sessions over the last 3 years where financing was discussed. He smiled, a thin, tight expression that didn't reach his eyes. You know I can't give you those, he said. I am a shareholder. I said, I have a right to inspect the books. You are a minority shareholder with non-voting stock, he corrected. And the minutes you are asking for are privileged. They contain sensitive strategic discussions that, if leaked, could damage the company's competitive standing. I stepped closer to his desk. Is that what we are calling it now? I asked. Competitive standing? Is that legal code for laundering money through a shell company in a strip mall? Graham's face went hard. The boredom vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. Be very careful. Madeline, he said softly, you are throwing around words that have consequences. I know about Lark Pine. I said, I know about the $5.1 million. And I know that my father didn't announce Trent as the successor because he believes in him. He did it because he was told to. Graham walked around his desk. He sat on the edge of it, looking down at me. You are grieving, he said. You are emotional. You didn't get the toy you wanted. So now you are trying to break it so no one else can play. Stop gaslighting me. Graham. I am warning you, he said. His voice dropped an octave. You have no standing here. You are a former employee and a disgruntled heir. If you continue to harass the company or its officers, I will file a restraining order. I will sue you for tortious interference. I will drain whatever trust fund you have left until you are selling that watch your father gave you just to pay for a public defender. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't legal advice. It was a threat. You are scared, I said. Graham laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. I am not scared. Madeline, I am efficient, and you are a liability. Go home, bake some cookies, leave the business to the people who understand the cost of doing it. I walked out of his office, my heart pounding. He hadn't denied it. He hadn't tried to explain the invoices. He had just threatened to destroy me if I kept looking. That was a confirmation in itself. I needed someone who wasn't afraid of Graham Sutter. Someone who remembered the company before the rot set in. I drove out to the Whisper Creek retirement community. It was a place where Briar Glen's elderly elite went to play bridge and wait for the end. I was looking for Howard Klein. Howard had been the CFO of Butler Hawthorne for 30 years. He had retired 5 years ago, abruptly, right before my father started acting strange. I found him on the putting green, a man of 80 with skin like tanned leather and hands that shook slightly as he gripped his putter. Howard, I called out. He looked up. He squinted against the sun. Maddie Butler? He asked. My God, you look just like your grandmother. I walked over to him. He smelled of Old Spice and freshly cut grass. I need to talk to you. Howard, about the company. He sighed. Leaning on his club. I heard about the dinner. I heard about Trent. I am sorry. Maddie, it should have been you. Why wasn't it? Howard? I asked. Why did Dad do it? Howard looked around the green. He seemed to be measuring the distance between us and the nearest nurse. Your father is a good man, Howard said. But he is a man who made a mistake. What mistake? Years ago, Howard said, lowering his voice. Just before I left, we were facing a lawsuit, a massive one, a class action regarding environmental runoff at the old textile plant. It would have bankrupted us. The EPA was involved. It was a nightmare. I frowned. I never heard about that, because it went away. Howard said, overnight, one day we were staring at the abyss, and the next day the lead plaintiff dropped the case. The EPA findings were lost in a bureaucratic shuffle. The problem just evaporated. How? I asked. Howard looked me in the eye. Your father made a promise. He said, he met with someone local, someone powerful. He came back from that meeting looking like he had aged 10 years. He told me the lawsuit was dead, but that we had a new partner, a silent partner. Lark Pine? I asked. Howard nodded. That was the name on the invoices. I tried to trace it, but your father told me to stop. He said the debt was personal, not corporate. He said the price of saving the company was his own autonomy. And Trent? I asked. Howard let out a sad chuckle. Trent doesn't ask questions. Maddie, that is why he is the heir. This partner, Whoever he is. He needs a CEO who will sign the papers without reading the fine print. You? You read everything. You would have fought them. Your father knew that. He didn't cut you out to hurt you. He cut you out to protect the deal. Who is the partner? Howard? He shook his head. I don't know. Your father never said the name, but I know this. He is someone who owns this town. Someone who can make lawsuits disappear and make millions of dollars appear out of thin air. He reached out and patted my arm. Let it go. Maddie. You can't fight a ghost. I left Whisper Creek with a new understanding. My father wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a man who had sold his soul to save his creation, and now the devil was coming to collect. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let Trent walk off a cliff. I couldn't let the employees, people like Marcy Vellum, lose their livelihoods because my father had made a deal with the dark. I needed a name. I knew that in Briar Glen, secrets weren't kept in safes. They were kept in the casual conversations of the social elite. They were whispered over glasses of Chardonnay at charity events. That evening, the Briar Glen Historical Society was hosting its monthly committee meeting. My mother was the chairwoman. Graham Sutter was the treasurer. I went home and changed. I put on a black dress that was modest but sharp. I pulled my hair back. I applied lipstick like war paint. I arrived at the country club just as the meeting was breaking for cocktails. The room was filled with the soft murmur of wealthy people complaining about taxes and the weather. I spotted my mother near the bar. She looked nervous, her eyes darting around the room. When she saw me, her face fell. Madeline, she whispered as I approached. What are you doing here? You know how tense things are. I'm just here to support the history of our town. Mother, I said, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Graham Sutter was standing nearby, talking to a man I recognized as a major donor, a real estate developer named Mr. Henderson. I moved closer, turning my back to them. Pretending to examine a painting on the wall, I focused all my attention on their voices, worried about the transition. Graham, Mr. Henderson was saying, Trent is a nice boy, but he is young, and with the market the way it is, we are handling it, Graham said. His voice was smooth, reassuring. The structure is solid. But what about the liquidity? Henderson pressed. I heard rumors about a cash crunch. Graham lowered his voice. I had to strain to hear him. The partner situation is being handled quietly. Graham said, We have assurances. The capital flow will resume once the succession is formalized. The partner situation. And then, Graham said something else. A slip. A moment of arrogance. He won't let the asset fail. Graham said, He has too much tied up in the integration with the Harrow Foundation projects. I froze. The Harrow Foundation. Wesley Harrow. The name hit me like a physical blow. Wesley Harrow was the wealthiest man in Briar Glen. A philanthropist. A recluse. A man who had buildings named after him. He was the saint of the town. But he was also a man who had hated my grandfather. There was a legendary feud between them decades ago. Something about land rights and a broken contract. Graham realized his mistake instantly. I heard him clear his throat. I mean, generally speaking, our charitable alignments are strong, he corrected quickly. I walked away. I didn't look back. I had a name, or at least a lead that made sense. I drove straight to Elena's office. It was 9 at night, but she was still there. I burst in. Harrow. I said, I think it is Wesley Harrow. Elena didn't look up from her screen. That would explain the influence. She said, Harrow owns the bank, the land, and half the city council. If he wanted to make a lawsuit disappear, he could do it with a phone call. She turned to me. But I found something else. Madeline. Something worse. What? I dug deeper into the Lark Pine ledger entries. I found a discrepancy in how they were booked versus how they were reported to the IRS. She pulled up a spreadsheet. See this? She pointed. Internally, these are listed as vendor returns. But on the tax filings, which I managed to access through a cache of documents your friend Marcy accidentally on purpose left on the shared drive, they aren't listed at all. What does that mean? It means fraud. Madeline, tax fraud, bank fraud. Your father and Graham Sutter have been cooking the books to hide the source of the money. If the IRS looks at this, they don't just fine the company, they put people in prison. I sank into a chair. Prison. My father. And there is one more thing. Elena said. She handed me a piece of paper. It was a printout of an email. This came to your old company email address an hour ago. She said, I still have access to the server mirror I created. It looks like the bank's automated system hasn't updated their contact list for the Estate Oversight Committee. I took the paper. It was a formal letter from the bank. To Estate Oversight Committee, CC, R. Butler, G. Sutter, M. Butler, inactive. Re. Covenant breach and beneficial ownership disclosure. Dear Mr. Butler, this letter serves as a formal notice of default. The cessation of capital injections from the undisclosed third-party guarantor has triggered a liquidity ratio violation under the terms of your loan agreement. Furthermore, our compliance department has flagged the beneficial ownership disclosures provided last quarter as potentially incomplete. Please confirm the identity of the primary beneficiary of the Lark Pine entity within 48 hours, or we will be forced to accelerate the loan and initiate foreclosure proceedings on the collateral, including the Briar Glen estate. I read it twice. Accelerate the loan. Foreclosure. They are going to take the house, I whispered. They are going to take everything, Elena said. The company, the house, the assets. If they find out the beneficial owner is Wesley Harrow, a man who might have a conflict of interest or a regulatory red flag, the bank will panic. They will strip the carcass clean. I looked at the letter. My father was trying to hold back the tide with a broom. He had disinherited me to satisfy Harrow, hoping that would keep the money flowing. But the money had stopped anyway. Maybe Harrow was testing Trent. Maybe Harrow was tightening the noose. I felt a shift inside me. For the last 3 days, I had been fueled by anger. I had been the scorned daughter, the overlooked woman trying to prove she was smart. I had been fighting for my share. But looking at that letter, the anger evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy dread. This wasn't about my inheritance anymore. It wasn't about the watch or the title. This was about 500 employees who were about to lose their jobs. It was about Marcy Vellum's mortgage. It was about the fact that my father, for all his flaws, was about to be destroyed by a predator he had invited into his home. If I walked away now, I would be rich. I could sell the watch. I could move to New York. I could watch the Butler empire burn from a safe distance and tell everyone I told them so. But I wasn't that person. I was the dependable one. I was the one who fixed things. I looked up at Elena. We aren't going to let them foreclose. I said, How do you stop it? She asked. You have no power. I have the truth. I said, and I have nothing to lose. Trent is terrified. Dad is compromised. Graham is arrogant. I stood up. I am not going to fight for the estate. Elena, I don't want the money. Then what do you want? She asked. I want to kill the snake. I said. I picked up the bank letter. I am going to expose Lark Pine. I am going to expose Harrow. And if I have to burn my father's reputation to save the company he built, then I will do it. You will be the villain, Elena warned. Your family will never forgive you. Your mother will hate you. The town will look at you as the daughter who betrayed her father. I know, I said. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of her office. I looked tired, but I looked steady. Let them hate me. I said, as long as the checks clear on Monday. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. Prepare a full report. Elena, everything you have found, the invoices, the tax gaps, the dates, make it bulletproof. Where are you going? She asked. I'm going to see my father. I said, and this time, I am not asking for answers. I am demanding a surrender. I drove up the winding driveway of the estate with the bank letter burning a hole in my pocket. The morning mist was still clinging to the manicured hedges, giving the house a ghostly, detached quality. It looked like a castle in a fairy tale. But I knew now that the foundation was rotting. I didn't wait for the housekeeper to let me in. I still had my key. a heavy brass thing that felt substantial in my hand. I walked straight through the foyer, past the silent portraits of my ancestors, who were undoubtedly rolling in their graves, and into my father's study. He was there, as I knew he would be, sitting behind the massive oak desk that had always made him look invincible. Now, surrounded by stacks of paper and empty coffee cups, he just looked besieged. He looked up as I entered. He didn't smile. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Madeline," he said, "I thought we said everything we needed to say. Not even close." I said, "I didn't sit down." I walked to the desk and placed 3 things on the leather blotter, lining them up like tarot cards. First, the photo of the mail drop at the shipping store. Second, Elena's spreadsheet showing the circular payments. Third, the letter from the bank threatening foreclosure. He stared at them. He didn't reach out to touch them. He just looked, his face unmoving, like a man watching a slow-motion car crash he had been expecting for years. "The bank sent that to my old email," I said, keeping my voice steady. "They are accelerating the loan. Dad, they are asking for beneficial ownership disclosure. If they don't get a name in 48 hours, they are coming for the house. They are coming for the company." He closed his eyes. "I know," he whispered. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the desk. "You are out of time," I said, "and you are out of lies. I know about Lark and Pine. I know about the $5.1 million. I know that Trent is meeting people in parking garages because he is terrified." I took a breath. "Who is the silent partner?" He opened his eyes. They were red-rimmed and watery. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the father who used to teach me how to ride a bike, the man who I thought could fix anything. "Do you trust me, Madeline?" he asked. His voice was a plea. "Do you trust that I love you? That I love this family?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Trust was a currency he had devalued to 0. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. When he realized I wasn't going to give him the validation he wanted, his composure cracked. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a crumbling. His shoulders slumped, and his face seemed to sag. "I didn't have a choice," he said. His voice was hoarse. "You have to understand. 7 years ago, we were dead in the water, the lawsuit, the expansion debt. We were going to lose it all. I would have been the butler who let the legacy die. So you took the money." I said, "I took the help," he corrected. Though the word sounded weak, he came to me. He offered a lifeline. He said he wanted to see the company thrive for the good of the town. He offered the capital we needed to bridge the gap. But it wasn't a loan. Was it? I asked. It was a purchase. It was an agreement. My father said he demanded certain oversights. He wanted to ensure his investment was protected. "And the succession?" I asked. "The decision to pick Trent?" My father looked away, staring at the spine of a book on the shelf behind me. "That was the condition," he said softly. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "The agreement," he said, his voice barely audible. "It had a clause, a succession clause, if I retired or stepped down. The partner had the right to approve the new chairman. He had veto power." Madeline, my mind reeled. The dinner, the speech about Trent's vision, the humiliation of the watch. It was all theater. "He wouldn't approve you," my father said, finally looking at me. "He said you were too sharp, too inquisitive. He said you would dig into the books and find the arrangement. He told me that if I named you, he would pull the funding immediately and call in the debt. He wanted Trent, because Trent is weak." I said, "Because Trent is agreeable." My father said, "Trent does what he is told." I felt a wave of nausea. My father hadn't rejected me because I wasn't good enough. He had rejected me because I was too competent to be controlled. "You sold us," I said. "You didn't save the company. Dad, you sold the steering wheel. I bought us time," he shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. The sudden anger was startling. "I kept 500 people employed. I kept this house. I kept your mother in the life she deserves. And now it is over." I said. The money stopped. "Why?" "He doesn't think Trent is listening," my father said, sinking back into his chair. Trent tried to make a decision last month without consulting the partner. A small thing, a vendor change. The partner didn't like it. The stopped payments are a warning. He is tightening the leash. Who is he? I asked again. My father shook his head. If I tell you, he will destroy us. He is already destroying us, I yelled. The bank is foreclosing. My father put his head in his hands. You don't know him. Madeline. You don't know what he's capable of. Please, just stop digging. Let Trent apologize. Let us get the money turned back on. I looked at him. He was pathetic. He was a man who had made a deal with a monster and convinced himself it was a business partnership. I grabbed the papers from the desk. I am not going to let Trent apologize, I said, and I am not going to let you hide this anymore. I turned and walked out. I heard him call my name, a broken sound echoing in the hallway. But I didn't stop. I drove back to town, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I needed coffee. I needed to think. I stopped at a small cafe on Main Street. I ordered a black coffee and a scone. When the barista rang it up, I tapped my credit card on the reader. It beeped, a harsh, dissenting tone. Declined. I frowned. Try it again, I said. She tapped it again. Declined. I pulled out my debit card. Declined. A line was forming behind me. Heat rose in my cheeks. I am sorry, I mumbled. I fumbled in my purse for cash. Finding a crumpled $20 bill, I paid and walked out. Checking my banking app on my phone. Access revoked. Contact account administrator. Trent. I stood on the sidewalk, the cold wind biting through my coat. They had frozen me out. My personal accounts were linked to the family trust structure for tax purposes. I had never bothered to separate them because I never thought I would be at war with my own blood. My phone buzzed. A notification from the rideshare app I used. Payment method invalid. They were cutting my supply lines. They couldn't fire me. So they were trying to starve me. It was petty, but it was realistic. It was exactly the kind of move Trent would make, a button pushed from a distance to avoid a confrontation. I walked back to my car. Thankfully, I had filled the tank yesterday. I drove to the bed and breakfast. I needed to regroup. When I walked into the small lobby, the owner, a sweet woman named Mrs. Higgins, looked up with a sympathetic smile. Your mother is here, dear, she said. She is in the parlor. I stiffened. Of course she was. I walked into the parlor. My mother was sitting on a floral sofa, her hands clasped around her Hermes bag. She looked entirely out of place, like a diamond sitting in a sandbox. Madeline, she said, standing up. Did you come to tell me my credit cards aren't working? I asked. Or did you come to verify that I'm sufficiently humiliated? She winced. I didn't know about the cards. Trent? Trent is angry. He says you are trying to sabotage his transition. I am trying to stop the bank from seizing your house. Mother? She stepped closer, the scent of her expensive perfume filling the small room. Please, Madeline, she said. Her voice was trembling. I had lunch with the committee today. People are talking. They say you were asking questions at the Historical Society. They say there is a rift. A rift? I laughed. It was a harsh sound. Dad sold my birthright to a silent partner because he was too afraid of me. That is not a rift. Mother, that is a betrayal. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was tight, desperate. You have to stop, she said. We cannot handle a scandal. Not now. Your father, his heart is not strong. If this comes out, if people know we are in trouble, the shame will kill him. The shame. That was always the currency in our house. What about the employees? I asked. What about Marcy? What about the people who will lose their homes if the company collapses? Does their shame matter? My mother looked confused, as if I were speaking a foreign language. We have a responsibility to the family name. She said, that is our job, to hold it together. Please, darling, just go back to the city. I will talk to Trent. I will make sure he unfreezes your accounts. I will make sure you are taken care of. Just go. She was offering me an allowance. Hush money from my own mother. I pulled my hand away. I can't go. Mom, "Why?" she cried. "Why are you doing this?" "Because someone has to be the adult," I said. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and sadness. Then she picked up her bag. "You are hardening." "Madeline," she said, "you used to be so soft." I didn't reply. I watched her leave. She was right. I was hardening. I was calcifying into something that could survive the impact. I left the bed and breakfast and drove to Elena's office. I needed facts, not emotions. Elena was pacing when I arrived. She had a whiteboard covered in diagrams. "It is worse than I thought," she said without preamble. She tapped a red circle on the board. I traced the tax filings back 5 years. She said, "The accounting structure your father used to bring in the Lark and Pine money? It is illegal. Not just gray area illegal. It is fraud. They booked the incoming cash as consulting credits to avoid declaring it as income or equity. And?" I asked. "And that means the company's stated revenue is false." Elena said, "They used those credits to inflate the EBT day. They secured bank loans based on those inflated numbers. That is bank fraud. Madeline, if the Department of Justice looks at this, your father goes to federal prison. Trent goes to prison. Graham Sutter probably goes to prison, though he is slippery enough to maybe cut a deal." I stared at the board. My father wasn't just a victim of coercion. He was a criminal. He had broken the law to save the image of success. Even if he thought he was saving the company? I asked. "Intent doesn't matter when the numbers are fake." Elena said. She looked at me seriously. "If you expose this," she said, "you are sending your family to jail. You need to understand that. This isn't just a board coup. This is an indictment." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I didn't want my father in a cell. I just wanted the partner gone. There has to be a way to sever the tie without detonating the bomb. I said, "Only if the partner walks away." Elena said, "But why would he? He owns you." My phone buzzed. It was Marcy Vellum. "Can you meet?" "Industrial Park." 10 minutes. I met her in the parking lot behind the old warehouse district. It was raining lightly. Marcy was sitting in her car, crying. I got into the passenger seat. "What happened?" I asked. "Layoffs," she sobbed. "Trent sent down a directive an hour ago. We are cutting 20% of the workforce, immediate effect, no severance. He says it is a strategic restructuring. It is panic." I said, "He is trying to free up cash to pay the partner. They are firing people who have been there for 20 years. Marcy said, "David in records? Gone. The entire logistics support team? Gone. Madeline, people are terrified. They are packing boxes right now." I felt the anger burn through the dread. Trent was sacrificing the innocent to pay the ransom. "I need you to do something for me." "Marcy," I said. "Anything," she said, wiping her eyes. "I need the full contact list for the board of directors." I said, "Including the external members, and I need the bylaws regarding emergency meetings." "I can get them," she said. "But Trent will kill me. He can't kill you if I save the company first," I said. I left her and drove back toward the center of town. I passed the park, I passed the library, I passed the Harrow Foundation building, a massive brick structure with white pillars. Wesley Harrow. I thought about the timeline. Howard Klein had said the partner was connected to the early expansion. Harrow had been the one who sold my grandfather the land for the first factory. There had been a dispute over the mineral rights. My grandfather had won in court. Humiliating Harrow. Harrow had waited 40 years. And then, when my father was drowning, he had offered a hand. Not to help, but to enslave. He didn't want money. He had plenty of money. He wanted to own the Butler legacy. He wanted to make my father dance. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Unknown number. I stared at the screen. "He is coming to collect. Your dad promised him the estate. He wants you gone because you ask questions." I looked at the words. "He wants you gone." It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a countdown. I realized then that I couldn't solve this from the shadows. I couldn't solve it with private conversations or forensic accounting alone. As long as this remained a family secret. Harrow held all the cards. He thrived in the dark. I had to drag him into the light. I pulled over to the side of the road. I opened my laptop, tethering it to my phone because I didn't trust the public Wi-Fi. I opened a blank email. To Board of Directors, Butler Hawthorne Group, from Madeline Butler, shareholder, subject, formal request for emergency board meeting, material breach of fiduciary duty. I typed furiously. I didn't use emotional language. I used the language of the bylaws Marcy had mentioned. Pursuant to Article 4, Section 2 of the Corporate Bylaws, I am formally requesting an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors to address immediate and critical threats to the company's solvency. Attached, you will find correspondence from our primary lender indicating a notice of default and intent to foreclose. Attached, you will find evidence of undisclosed third-party control over executive decision-making, in direct violation of SEC reporting requirements and the board's mandate. The current leadership has failed to disclose material liabilities. If immediate action is not taken to rectify these breaches, every member of this board faces individual liability for the resulting collapse. I demand a meeting within 24 hours. I attach the files, the bank letter, the summary of Elena's findings. I hovered my finger over the send button. Once I sent this, there was no going back. I would be declaring war on my father, my brother, and the most powerful man in town. I would be the pariah my mother feared. I looked at the rain hitting the windshield. I thought about the cheap watch my father had given me, a sentimental token. He had underestimated me. They all had. They thought I was just the help. I pressed send. The email swooshed away. I sat there for a moment, listening to the rain. I felt a strange sense of calm. The secret was out. The weapon Harrow had used against us, our fear of exposure, was gone. I had exposed it myself. Now, we just had to see who survived the explosion. The boardroom on the top floor of the Butler Hawthorne building was a space designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of glass and polished mahogany, suspended 20 stories above the streets of Briar Glen. I had sat in this room 100 times as an operations manager, taking notes, serving coffee, offering silent support to my father. Today, I sat at the far end of the table, facing the empty chair at the head where my father usually presided. To my right sat Elena Parkhurst, her posture rigid, her laptop open and humming like a weapon. To my left sat Marcy Vellum, her hands trembling so violently she had to clasp them together on top of her notepad. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and heavy with impending violence. The door swung open. Trent entered first. He looked like a man who had not slept in 3 days. His tie was slightly crooked, his eyes bloodshot. Behind him walked Graham Sutter, the family attorney, looking as sleek and predatory as ever. Though I noticed a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there a week ago. My father came last. He walked slowly, using a cane I had never seen him use before. He looked small inside his suit. They stopped when they saw us. "What is this?" Trent demanded, his voice cracking. He pointed a finger at Elena. "Who is she?" "This is a closed session. This is an emergency meeting of the board, called by a shareholder," I said, my voice steady. "Ms. Parkhurst is my financial advisor. She is here to present findings regarding the company's solvency. You have no authority to call this." Trent snapped. He looked at the other board members who were filing in behind him, 6 men and 2 women who represented the old money of Briar Glen and the institutional investors from the city. They looked uncomfortable, averting their eyes. "I have every authority," I said. "I placed the bank letter on the table. When the company is in default, any shareholder can demand a review of leadership. It is in the bylaws." Trent, Article 4. Graham Sutter stepped forward. He placed a hand on Trent's shoulder, silencing him. "Madeline," Graham said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We understand you are upset about the succession. We understand that emotions are running high. But dragging these good people here on a Tuesday morning because you want to relitigate your father's decision is unprofessional. This isn't about succession." "Graham," I said, "it is about fraud." The word hung in the air. The board members froze. Chairs scraped against the floor as people sat down. Suddenly very attentive, I stood up. I walked to the whiteboard where Elena had already taped up the timeline of the invoices. "This is not a personal grievance," I said, addressing the board. "This is a risk management assessment. Over the last 3 years, the Butler Hawthorne Group has experienced 12 significant cash flow shortages. In every single instance, the shortfall was covered within 24 hours by an entity known as Lark and Pine Advisory." I pointed to the red blocks on the chart. These payments were not loans. I continued. They were not equity investments. They were booked as vendor credits. This accounting treatment allowed the executive team to hide the company's true liability from the bank. It inflated our revenue and concealed the fact that we have been operating on a lifeline provided by an undisclosed third party. I turned to look at my father. He was staring at the table, his face gray. "We are currently $5.1 million in debt to a ghost," I said, "and 3 weeks ago, the ghost stopped paying." Graham Sutter laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Lark and Pine is a legitimate strategic consultancy. They provided valuable market analysis during the expansion." Elena stood up. She didn't shout. She just read from a sheet of paper. "Lark and Pine is a mail drop in a shipping store on Industrial Way," she said. "They have no employees, no website, and no tax ID distinct from a shell holding company. Their invoices list services like logistical support on dates when the company had zero logistical movement. The pricing is 400% above market rate. That is a matter of interpretation," Graham said, his eyes narrowing. "It is a matter of math," Elena countered. "And the math says this is money laundering." Graham slammed his hand on the table. "Enough!" he shouted. He turned to the board, spreading his hands in a gesture of reason. "Ladies and gentlemen, please. Madeline is grieving. She has been under immense strain since the announcement. She is lashing out. It is tragic. Really. We all know how unstable family dynamics can get when money is involved. She is seeing conspiracies where there is only standard business complexity." He looked at me with pity. "Madeline, darling," he said, "you need rest. You are making a scene that will embarrass your father." I felt the heat rise in my chest. He was using the oldest trick in the book, the hysterical woman, the emotional daughter. He was trying to invalidate my facts by attacking my sanity. I took a deep breath. I reached into my folder and pulled out the second document. "Is the First National Bank also emotionally unstable?" "Graham?" I asked. I slid the notice of default down the long mahogany table. "This arrived yesterday." I said, "The bank has flagged a covenant breach. They are demanding the identity of the beneficial owner of the Lark and Pine funds within 48 hours. If they do not get it, they will accelerate the loan. That means immediate repayment of $40 million. A collective gasp went through the room. A board member named Elias Sterling, a man who had served on the board for 20 years, reached out and took the letter. He put on his spectacles and read it. His face went pale. "It says they are initiating foreclosure protocols on the collateral," Elias said. His voice trembled. "The collateral includes the estate and the primary factory." He looked up at my father. "Richard, is this true?" My father didn't answer. He was gripping his cane so hard, his knuckles were white. "It is a misunderstanding," Trent blurted out. "We are handling it. Graham is handling it." "Handling it how?" Elias demanded. "By hiding it from the board? By letting a mail drop company hold the deed to our future?" Trent stood up. He looked frantic. "You don't understand," he yelled. "We couldn't tell you. The partner insisted on privacy." Elias Sterling looked down at the papers in front of him. He was flipping through the binder Elena had prepared. "Wait a minute," Elias said. He stopped on a page. He looked up, his eyes wide. "I am looking at the shareholder agreement amendment from 4 years ago," Elias said. "The one we passed without reading the fine print because counsel assured us it was administrative cleanup." He looked at Graham Sutter with venom. "There is a clause here regarding special advisory rights," Elias said. "It grants the holder of the Class B preferred shares issued to a blind trust, absolute consent rights over any change in the chairman or CEO position." The room went silent. Consent rights. That means... Elias said slowly. That Richard didn't pick Trent. This blind trust picked Trent. I looked at my father. He refused to meet my eyes. The succession wasn't a choice. I said, it was a compliance requirement. You announced Trent because the silent partner told you to. Richard, Elias said, his voice stern. Who holds the Class B shares? My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked terrified. We have a guest joining us, I said. I pressed the button on the center console of the phone system. The line connected with a digital chime. This is Sarah Jenkins from First National Bank, a voice said from the speaker. I am on the line as requested by Ms. Butler. Ms. Jenkins, I said. This is the board of directors. We have a question regarding the Lark and Pine entity. We need beneficial ownership disclosure immediately. The banker said. Her voice was crisp, professional, and completely devoid of mercy. Our compliance department has flagged the account for potential sanctions evasion. If we do not have a name by close of business tomorrow, we will freeze all operating accounts associated with Butler Hawthorne. Trent slammed his fist onto the table. You can't do that, he screamed at the speakerphone. You will kill the company. We are protecting our position. Mr. Butler, the banker replied. The lack of transparency suggests fraud. We do not lend to fraudsters. Trent turned to me. His face was twisted with rage, but beneath the rage, I saw the panic of a child who had broken something he couldn't fix. You did this, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. You called them. You are sabotaging the company just to punish me. I didn't sabotage it. Trent, I said calmly, I am trying to stop you from driving it off a cliff. You don't know what you're doing, he shrieked. He looked like he was about to cry. He promised he would cover us. He promised that if I took the chair, the money would keep coming. You are ruining the deal. He promised. Trent had just admitted it. He knew. He had been part of the bargain. Graham Sutter stepped in, his voice low and dangerous. I advise the board that this meeting is irregular and that any statements made by Mr. Trent Butler are under duress and privileged. We should adjourn. No, Marcy Vellum said. The voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise like a razor. Everyone turned. Marcy was standing up. She looked small in her oversized blazer, but her chin was high. We are not adjourning, Marcy said. Marcy, Graham warned, think about your pension. I am thinking about it, Marcy said. I am thinking that if the bank freezes the accounts tomorrow, there won't be a pension. She looked at the board. I am the head of operations, she said. For the last 18 months, I have been instructed by Mr. Sutter and the chairman's office to manually override the inventory depreciation schedules. I was told to book the Lark and Pine transfers as consulting rebates. She took a shaky breath. I asked if it was legal. She said, Mr. Sutter told me it was necessary for stability. He told me that if I didn't do it, the company would fail and it would be my fault. I have the emails. I have the memos. She looked at me, tears standing in her eyes. I'm tired of making it look normal, she whispered. It isn't normal. We are broke, and we are lying about it. The silence that followed was absolute. Graham Sutter looked as if he had been slapped. My father had his head in his hands. Elias Sterling stood up. He looked at the other board members. They nodded, a silent consensus forming in the wreckage of the meeting. I moved that the board immediately commission an independent internal investigation into the finances of the Butler Hawthorne Group. Elias said, I further move that pending the results of this investigation, the executive powers of Trent Butler and the legal authority of Graham Sutter be temporarily suspended. An interim executive committee will be formed, led by... He looked around the table. He looked at Trent, who was slumped in his chair. He looked at my father, who was broken. He looked at me, led by Madeline Butler. Elias said, Seconded. Another board member said instantly, All in favor? A chorus of ayes. Trent looked up, his eyes wide with shock. You can't, he whispered. He will be angry. Who will be angry? Trent? Elias asked. Trent didn't answer. He just stared at the table. Motion carries. Elias said, This meeting is adjourned. The room cleared slowly. The board members filed out, casting wary glances at my father and Trent. Graham Sutter gathered his papers in silence, shooting me a look of pure, distilled hatred before he walked out. Trent fled the room as if it were on fire. Elena packed up her laptop. She touched my arm. "You did it," she said softly. "I don't feel like I won." I said, "You survived," she said. "That is the only victory available today. I will get started on the forensic audit." She left. I was alone in the boardroom with my father. He hadn't moved. He was still sitting at the head of the table, staring at the polished wood. "Dad?" I said. He didn't look up. "You destroyed it," he whispered. "I saved it." I said, "I stopped the foreclosure. The bank will work with us now that we are being transparent." "You don't understand," he said. He sounded old, incredibly, painfully old. "Then tell me." I said. I walked over to him. I pulled out the chair next to him and sat down. "Tell me the truth. Why Trent? Why not me?" He turned his head slowly. His eyes were wet. "Because he threatened you," my father said. I frowned. "Who? The partner?" "Yes," my father said. "When the agreement was signed, when I took the money, I tried to negotiate. I told him that you were the smart one. I told him that you were the one who should run the company one day." He took a shuddering breath. He laughed at me. "Madeline," he said, "that was exactly why it could never be you. He said you were too sharp, too moral. He said that if I ever put you in charge, he wouldn't just bankrupt the company. He said he would destroy you personally. He said he would fabricate legal charges. He said he would ruin your reputation so thoroughly that you would never work again." I stared at him. The words settled over me like a cold shroud. "He picked Trent because Trent is safe," my father said. "Trent is harmless. Trent doesn't look under the rocks." He reached out and took my hand. His fingers were cold. "I announced Trent to save you. Madeline, I knew it would break your heart. I knew you would hate me. But I thought it was better for you to be angry and safe than to be the target of a man like that." I pulled my hand away gently. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It was grief, but it was also clarity. For days, I had believed my father didn't respect me. I had believed he didn't see my value, but the truth was more tragic. He saw my value perfectly. He saw it so clearly that he was terrified of it. He had disinherited me not because I was unworthy, but because I was a threat to the monster he had let in. The inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a target. "Who is he? Dad?" I asked. "You have to tell me now. The board knows about the consent rights. The bank knows. You can't protect him anymore." My father looked at the door, as if he expected someone to burst in. "It is Wesley Harrow," he whispered. I closed my eyes. I had known it. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Wesley Harrow, the philanthropist, the town hero, the man who owned the very ground Briar Glen was built on. "He hates us," my father said. "He has hated us since your grandfather beat him in court 40 years ago. He waited, he watched, and when we were weak, he bought us. He doesn't want money. Madeline, he wants to see a butler beg." I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the town. I could see the spire of the church. I could see the park that Harrow had paid for. He had orchestrated everything: the financial distress, the rescue, the succession. He had turned my family into his puppets, making us dance for his amusement. "You should have told me," I said, looking at my father's reflection in the glass. "I was trying to protect you," he said. "You didn't protect me." I said, "You just left me in the dark to fight a war I didn't know I was in." I turned back to him. "Go home, Dad. Go to Mom. Tell her the truth. Tell her everything." "What are you going to do?" he asked, fear rising in his voice again. "I'm going to finish it." I said. "You can't fight him," my father said. "He owns the town. He owns the judges. He owns the press. He owns the shadows." I said, That is his power. He operates through shell companies and mail drops and silent agreements. I walked to the door. I am not going to fight him in court. Dad, I am going to turn on the lights. I left the boardroom. I walked past the reception desk where the secretaries were whispering. I walked past Marcy Vellum, who gave me a nod of grim solidarity. I walked out of the building and into the cool afternoon air. I felt different. The hurt of the rejection was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't fighting for my father's approval anymore. I wasn't fighting for the estate. I was fighting for my freedom. Wesley Harrow had used my family's pride against us. He had counted on us keeping his secrets to save our own skins. He had counted on the Butler desire for appearance being stronger than our desire for truth. He was right about my father. He was right about Trent. But he was wrong about me. I took out my phone. I dialed Elena. "We have the name," I said. "Harrow?" she asked. "Harrow," I confirmed. "Okay," she said. "What is the play?" "Get the bank on board." I said, "Tell them we are cooperating fully. Tell them we are preparing a public statement regarding the restructuring." "Public?" Elena asked. "You are going to the press?" "Not yet." I said, "First, I am going to the board. I am going to give them the name. And then I am going to make Wesley Harrow a choice." "What choice?" "He can keep his anonymity and lose his control, or he can keep his control and lose his reputation." I hung up. I got into my car. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 3 p.m. I had 24 hours before the bank's deadline. 24 hours to break a hold that had lasted 7 years. I started the engine. My father had tried to save me by pushing me away. He had given me a watch and told me my time was my own. He was right. My time was my own. And I was going to use it to burn Wesley Harrow's leverage to the ground. The investigation room at Elena Parkhurst's office had become my second home. It was a sterile environment, a place of cold coffee and colder facts, but it was the only place in Briar Glen where I felt safe. The air outside was thick with rumors. My mother had stopped calling. Trent was hiding in his condo. The town was holding its breath, waiting for the Butler family to implode. Elena was standing by the printer when I walked in on Wednesday morning. The hum of the machine was the only sound in the room. She held up a single sheet of paper. "The ink still fresh. We got him," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of triumph. It was the voice of someone who had looked into a drain and found exactly what she expected to find. I walked over and took the paper. It was a schematic of wire transfers, a visual map of how money moved through the dark. "Look at the bottom left," Elena said, pointing to a box labeled Lark and Pine Holdings. "Now look at where the administrative fees are routed." I traced the line with my finger. It led to another box, the Harrow Community Foundation. "It is sloppy," Elena said. "Arrogant. They use the same registered agent for the shell company as they did for the charity. And look at the trustee signature on the incorporation documents for Lark and Pine." I looked at the scrawl at the bottom of the page. It was illegible to the untrained eye, but Elena had overlaid it with another signature from a public deed. "It is the treasurer of the Harrow Foundation," Elena said. "The money that saved your company came from the same pot of gold that built the town library and the children's park. Wesley Harrow is Lark and Pine." I stared at the diagram. Wesley Harrow, the man who was practically a saint in Briar Glen. The man who sat on the boards of hospitals and universities. He was the one who had been slowly strangling my father for 7 years. He used his charity to launder his control. I said, "He used his reputation as a shield." Elena corrected, "Who would suspect the town's greatest benefactor of predatory lending? It is perfect. If you accuse him, you look like a monster attacking a philanthropist." I felt a cold anger settle in my gut. It wasn't just about money. It was about the hypocrisy. Harrow had played the benevolent king while holding a knife to my father's throat. This connects the money. I said, "But it doesn't prove the coercion. It doesn't prove he forced the succession." Elena nodded. She walked to her desk and picked up a heavy, dust-covered file folder. "That is why I went back to the board archives," she said. "You authorized me to look at everything. So I looked at the things Graham Sutter thought he had buried." She opened the folder. Inside was a yellowed envelope, the edges fraying. It was a certified letter, dated 7 years ago. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize, but the signature on the receipt was my father's. Read the second paragraph. Elena said, I pulled out the letter. It was written in legalese, but the message was brutal in its clarity. Regarding the outstanding liability and the personal leverage discussed in our private meeting of October 4th, my client agrees to provide the capital injection of $5.1 million under the stipulation of anonymous oversight. I read on. Furthermore, the undersigned agrees that any future transition of executive power, specifically the role of chairman, shall be subject to the approval of the investor to ensure the continued stability of the asset. Breach of this succession protocol will result in the immediate acceleration of all debts, and there, at the bottom, was my father's signature. And next to it, the signature of the investor's representative, Wesley Harrow. I felt sick. My father hadn't just made a handshake deal. He had signed a contract selling his own children's future. He had acknowledged personal leverage, a phrase that reeked of blackmail. This is it, I whispered. This proves the succession was rigged. It proves your father was a puppet, Elena said, and it proves Graham Sutter knew about it. He notarized the document. I closed the folder. I am taking this. I said, where? Elena asked. To the man who thinks he can still make a deal. I said, I found Graham Sutter in the company cafeteria. It was an odd place for him, but the executive dining room was closed due to the layoffs. He was sitting alone at a corner table, picking at a salad. He looked diminished. The arrogance that usually surrounded him like a force field was flickering. I sat down opposite him. I didn't say hello. I just slid the copy of the certified letter across the table. He looked at it. He didn't pick it up. He didn't have to. He knew exactly what it was. You went deep. Madeline, he said quietly. Deeper than I thought you could. You drafted this, I said. You let my father sign away his autonomy. You let him sell the company to Wesley Harrow. I let him save the company, Graham said, looking up. His eyes were cold. You were too young to remember the panic. Madeline, we were days away from bankruptcy. The EPA lawsuit was going to bury us. Harrow offered a way out. He offered a cage. I said, and you locked the door. Graham pushed his salad away. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. What do you want? Madeline? Do you want the chair? Is that it? Because I can get it for you. I stared at him. You can get it for me? Harrow is pragmatic, Graham said. He wants stability. Trent is struggling. The bank is rattling the cage. If I go to Harrow and tell him that you are the only one who can calm the waters, he might listen. We can restructure the deal. We can give you the title. We can give you the salary. And the debt? I asked. The control? That remains, Graham said. That is the cost of doing business. But you get what you want. You get the legacy. You get to be the queen. We can announce it next week. We will say Trent stepped down for health reasons. He was offering me the same poison he had fed my father. He was offering me the crown, provided I agreed to wear the chains. And if I refuse? I asked. Graham sighed. He adjusted his cufflinks. Then you burn it all down, he said. If you expose Harrow, he will sue us for breach of contract. He will sue us for defamation. He will reveal why he had leverage in the first place. What leverage? I asked. Graham smiled. A thin, cruel smile. Why do you think the EPA lawsuit disappeared? Madeline? Harrow didn't just pay it off. He buried the evidence of the dumping. If that comes out, your father doesn't just lose the company. He goes to jail for environmental crimes. And so do I. And so does Trent, who signed the compliance reports for the last 3 years. He leaned back. So, here is the offer. You take the job, you take the money, you shut up about Harrow, and your family stays out of prison. It was a perfect trap, or at least, he thought it was. He didn't understand that I had already made my choice. I wasn't trying to save the Butler name anymore. I was trying to save the soul of the company. I stood up. You think everyone has a price, Graham, I said. Because you sold yourself so long ago, you forgot what it feels like to own your own mind. I am trying to help you, he hissed. No, I said. You are trying to buy my silence with my own inheritance, but the inheritance is tainted. I don't want it. I walked away. I could feel his eyes boring into my back. He was terrified. He knew that the one thing he couldn't negotiate with was someone who didn't want the money. I drove to the estate. It was the last time I would make this drive as a daughter seeking answers. The next time, I would be an executioner. My father was in the garden. He was sitting on a stone bench, looking at the rose bushes my mother had planted 30 years ago. He looked frail. The stress of the last week had carved deep lines into his face. I sat down next to him. I didn't touch him. I know it is Harrow. I said. He nodded slowly. He didn't look surprised. And I know about the EPA evidence, I added. He flinched. That got a reaction. He turned to me, his eyes wide with fear. Graham told you? He whispered. He tried to use it to blackmail me. I said, he offered me the chairmanship if I kept quiet. My father looked at his hands. They were shaking. I was so scared. Madeline, he said, I was so scared of losing everything. Harrow came to me like a savior. He said he could fix the lawsuit. He said he could handle the debt. All he wanted was a silent interest and the right to choose your successor. I said, he didn't ask for that until later. My father said, after the papers were signed, after I was already compromised. He tightened the screws slowly. He wanted to make sure the company never became powerful enough to challenge him again. That is why he wanted Trent. He knew Trent would keep us small. He knew you would try to grow. He looked at me, tears spilling onto his cheeks. I am sorry. He sobbed. I am so sorry. I looked at him. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. He wasn't a villain. He was just a man who had been weak at the worst possible moment, and he had spent 7 years paying for it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the bank letter and the certified mail. I am going to the board tomorrow. Dad, I said. No, he pleaded. Harrow will destroy us. He will release the EPA files. I will go to jail. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he won't. Harrow has a reputation too. He runs the foundation. He is the town hero. If it comes out that he used his charity to cover up toxic dumping and blackmail a local business, he goes down with us. It is a gamble. My father said, it is the only move left. I said. I stood up. I looked down at him. You have a choice. Dad, you can come to the meeting and lie for him one last time. You can protect your image, or you can stand up and protect the employees. You can protect the truth. He looked up at me. He looked terrified. I can't. He whispered, then I will do it alone. I said. I turned to leave. Madeline. He called out. I stopped. I am tired, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. I am so tired of the lie. Then let it go. I said. The final board meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning. The atmosphere was different this time. The panic had settled into a grim determination. The board members knew something was coming. I sat at the end of the table. Elena was beside me. The bank representative, Sarah Jenkins, was on the video screen. Trent was there, looking like a ghost. Graham Sutter was there, looking like a cornered rat. And then, the door opened. My father walked in. He was wearing his best suit. He had shaved. He stood straighter than he had in months. He walked to the head of the table. He didn't sit down. He looked at me. He gave me a small, sad nod. Then he looked at the board. I have a statement to make, he said. His voice was strong. Graham Sutter half rose from his chair. Richard, I advise you to... Sit down. Graham. My father snapped. The authority in his voice silenced the room. My father took a breath. For the last 7 years, the Butler Hawthorne Group has been under the undue influence of an undisclosed third party. He said, this party used financial leverage and personal coercion to dictate the strategic direction of this company, including the recent succession announcement. He paused. I entered into this agreement to hide my own failures. I allowed this company to be compromised to protect myself, and in doing so, I betrayed my fiduciary duty to this board, to my employees, and to my family. The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. I am resigning as chairman, effective immediately. My father said, but before I go, I will answer the question the bank has asked. He looked directly at the speakerphone, the beneficial owner of Lark and Pine Advisory. The silent partner who holds the leverage over this estate is Wesley Harrow. The name hung in the air like smoke. Graham Sutter closed his eyes. He knew it was over. Suddenly, the phone on the conference table buzzed. A red light flashed. Mr. Harrow's legal team is on line 2. The secretary's voice said over the intercom, They say they have an urgent cease and desist order. Put them on. I said. The line clicked. This is Marcus Thorne, representing Mr. Wesley Harrow. A deep voice boomed. We are aware of the defamatory statements being made in this meeting. We are prepared to file immediate litigation for breach of contract and libel. Mr. Harrow will also be releasing information regarding environmental negligence by the Butler family. We advise you to cease all discussion of his involvement immediately. The board members looked at each other nervously. The threat was real. Then, Sarah Jenkins spoke from the video screen. Mr. Thorne, this is First National Bank. There was a pause. The bank carried more weight than any lawyer. We are currently in possession of evidence linking your client's charitable foundation to a shell company used to manipulate the solvency of a borrower, Sarah said calmly. We are obligated to file a suspicious activity report with the Treasury Department within the hour. If your client wishes to escalate this into a public legal battle, we will be forced to freeze all accounts associated with the Harrow Foundation pending a federal investigation. Silence on the line. Wesley Harrow could fight the Butlers. He could crush my father, but he couldn't fight the Treasury Department. He couldn't fight a bank that was threatening to lock up his philanthropic empire. We can discuss a settlement, the lawyer stammered. There will be no settlement, Sarah said. We require a full divestment of Mr. Harrow's interest in Butler Hawthorne. The debt will be restructured. The control clauses are null and void. If he agrees to walk away quietly, we might delay the federal filing. The lawyer asked for a recess. We put them on hold. It was done. The leverage was gone. Trent put his head on the table and began to sob. It wasn't a dignified cry. It was the weeping of a child who had been holding a heavy weight for too long. I stood up and walked over to him. I put a hand on his shoulder. Trent, I said softly. He looked up. His face was a mess of tears and snot. I didn't know what to do. Maddie, he choked out. Harrow told me. He told me that if I didn't take the job, Dad would go to jail. He told me I was the only one who could save him. I didn't want the company. I hate the company. I just wanted to save Dad. I looked at him. For weeks, I had thought he was greedy. I had thought he was arrogant, but he was just a victim. Same as my father. Harrow had used Trent's love for our father as a weapon. I know. I said, It is okay. It is over. I looked at the board. They were watching us. They were waiting for me to take the chair. They were waiting for the victor to claim the spoils. My father was standing by the window, looking old and broken. Graham Sutter had quietly slipped out of the room, presumably to call his own lawyer. Madeline. Elias Sterling said, The board is ready to vote. We can appoint you interim chairwoman immediately. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. It looked lonely. I thought about the watch, a sentimental token. I thought about the last week, the lies, the secrets, the way the desire for control had poisoned everything. If I took the job now, I would just be the next butler trying to hold it together. I would be cleaning up the mess for the next 20 years. No, I said. The room murmured. I am not the chairman. I said, Madeline, you are the only one who knows the truth. Elias said, Exactly. I said, and that is why I can't run it. This family, we need to step back. We need to heal. We cannot be the ones to fix this. I walked to the whiteboard. I picked up a marker. I propose a restructuring. I said, I wrote 3 points on the board. 1. Immediate resignation of all family members from executive roles. 2. Appointment of an external, professional CEO to navigate the debt restructuring. 3. Conversion of the Butler family shares into non-voting preferred stock. I turned back to them. We keep the ownership. I said, we keep the dividends, but we give up the control. We give up the power to hide things. We bring in someone who answers to the numbers, not to a secret past. But Madeline, my father said from the window, the legacy is what almost destroyed us. Dad, I said, the legacy is a lie. Let's save the company. Let's save the jobs. Let's save ourselves. I looked at him. I held his gaze. Sign the authorization. Dad, let it go. He looked at me for a long moment. He saw that I wasn't doing this to hurt him. I was doing it to free him. He walked to the table. He took the pen from Elias. He signed the paper. It was done. 3 weeks later, the restructuring was brutal but effective. The new CEO was a woman from Chicago with a background in distressed assets. She was tough, transparent, and completely uninterested in Butler family drama. The bank was happy. The employees were safe. I was packing the last of my things from my office. I hadn't kept the consulting role. I hadn't kept anything. I walked out to the parking lot. My father was waiting for me by his car. He looked different. He was wearing a cardigan and slacks, not a suit. He looked smaller, but lighter. He handed me a small box. I already have the watch. Dad, I said, this isn't a watch. He said. I opened it. It was the key to the estate. Your mother and I are moving to the cottage on the coast, he said. We are selling the big house. We don't need the rooms. We don't need the ghosts. He looked at me. You were the only one strong enough to do it. Madeline, he said, I should have seen that years ago. You saw it. I said, that is why you were scared. He smiled. A sad, weary smile. What will you do now? He asked. I looked at the sky. It was a clear, bright blue. I had no job. I had no title. I had a family that was broken but healing. And for the first time in my life, I had no one telling me who I was supposed to be. I don't know, I said, and it was the most beautiful sentence I had ever spoken. I got into my car. I put the key in the ignition. I drove past the factory, past the town square where Wesley Harrow's statue still stood. Though his reputation was already beginning to crumble as the rumors spread, I drove toward the highway. I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to Dad Announced Your Brother Deserves the Entire Estate. Then his company lost its $5.1 million silent partner. It has been a journey through the secrets of Briar Glen, and I hope you felt every twist and turn alongside Madeline. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this unraveling of the Butler family mystery, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, betrayal, and redemption coming your way. Share your thoughts on Madeline's final choice. Did she do the right thing by walking away? Let me know in English in the comments. Until next time.